Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana. Yamunatira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajikacharya Stotra Satashishi Madhapai Charanaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajikacharya Stotra Satashishi Mad Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Sagaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sari Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shamakun Radha Kun Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Shri Mayapur Navadvip Dham Ki Jai. Nidwarka Dham Ki Jai. Gangamaya Devi Ki Jai. Jamunamaya Devi Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Tulsi Devi Ki Jai. Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All gloriously assembled devotees. All gloriously assembled devotees. All gloriously assembled devotees. All glories to Shishi Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We will be reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 31, The Movements of the Living Entities. Text 24 and 25. 24 doesn't have a purport, so I'll read it myself. Patito bhuvyasrin mishra vishtabur iva chestate roruyati gate jnane viparitam gatim gata. Translation: the child thus falls on the ground, smeared with stool and blood, and plays just like a worm germinated from the stool. He loses his superior knowledge and cries under the spell of Māyā. Text 25. Para-chandam na viduṣā puṣyamāṇo janena anabhipretam āpannaḥ pratyākhyātum anīśvaraḥ para-chandam na viduṣā puṣyamāṇo janena anabhipretam āpannaḥ pratyākhyātum anīśvaraḥ para-chandam na viduṣā puṣyamāṇo janena anabhipretam āpannaḥ pratyākhyātum anīśvaraḥ. Vaishnavis? Viduṣā. Para-chandam na viduṣā. Puṣyamāṇo janena sa. Anabhipretam pratyākhyātum anīśvaraḥ. Para-chandam, the desire of another. Na, not. Viduṣā, understanding. Puṣyamāṇaḥ, being maintained. Janena, by persons. Sa, he. Anabhipretam, into undesirable circumstances. Āpannaḥ, fallen. Pratyākhyātum, to refuse. Anīśvaraḥ, unable. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. After coming out of the abdomen, the child is given to the care of persons who are unable to understand what he wants, and thus he is nursed by such persons. Unable to refuse whatever is given to him, he falls into undesirable circumstances. Purport. Within the abdomen of the mother, the nourishment of the child was being carried on by nature's own arrangement. The atmosphere within the abdomen was not at all pleasing, but as far as the child's feeding was concerned, it was being properly done by the laws of nature. But upon coming out of the abdomen, the child falls into a different atmosphere. He wants to eat one thing, but something else is given to him, because no one knows his actual demand, and he cannot refuse the undesirables given to him. Sometimes the child cries for the mother's breast, but because the nurse thinks that it is due to the pain within his stomach that he is crying, she supplies him some bitter medicine. The child does not want it, but he continues to refuse it. But he cannot refuse it. He is put in very awkward circumstances, and the suffering continues. Om jnana-timirandasya kiranjana-shlakaya chakshurunmilitam yena tasmai Shri-gurave namaha. Shri Chaitanya manobhishtam stapitam yena bhutale swayam rupa kadamayam tadati swapadantikam. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uttapadakamlam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagna Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savrutam Prajana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padhan Sahagna Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtai Bhutale Srimate Vaisheshikadasa Hari Kariti Namane Nama Praharsha Shilaya Prabhupada Nusarane Nandita Hrideta Smai Shastra Bhajana Chorane Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtai Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Prachayane Nirvisesha Shunyavadi Pastyatadeshatarine Vancha Akalpatarubhyascha Kripasinduvevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, welcome to Srimad Bhagavatam class. Thank you very much for attending. I'm very grateful for everyone who is attending here today, especially in particular Swaswaru for encouraging me to take second initiation, and for Brigapati Prabhu, wherever he may be, for scheduling me on today's class. So, Hare Krishna. Yesterday, Shamchandra Prabhu gave a really nice class, and it ended on a nice note, or some discussion about the role of suffering in our purification, or in our reformation. And one of the conclusions that we came to was that karma alone, our suffering in this world it's not sufficient to escape the cycle of birth and death and regain our original Krishna conscious position. So we know from our sinful activities or from our V-karma, we have those depleted in the hellish planetary systems. And similarly, our pious activities, our karma, in other words, is depleted in the heavenly planetary systems. And then we return to this, into this world. So in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna actually describes those who are elevated to the heavenly planetary systems, that after enjoying vast heavenly sense pleasure, the results of their pious activities are exhausted, so they're depleted. And they return to this mortal planet again. Thus those who seek sense enjoyment by adhering to the principles of the three Vedas achieve only repeated birth and death. So the living entity is being placed on a kind of karmic roller coaster going up and down from the hellish planets to the heavenly planets, back down to the middle planetary system, over and over and over through many, many births and deaths. So just like any roller coaster, if you stay on it too long, you might get a little sick or a little nauseous. But we also spoke about yesterday how this nausea of the material energy is a kind of prerequisite to approach Krishna and to discover the third path of karma, which is called akarma, or devotional service. So this is the path that we're trying to follow. And Queen Kunti explains it very nicely in the Srimad Bhagavatam, this prerequisite of being exhausted, where she says, Janmaishvarya Shuddha Shribir, Edamana Madapuman, Naivahar Yabi Datum Vai, Tvamakinchana Gocharam. That anyone can approach Krishna, he's very easily accessible actually, but only onto those who are materially exhausted. They've come to the conclusion that this material world, there's something fishy about it. It doesn't actually satisfy our material desires. And thus those who are on the path of material progress, trying to enhance their birth, their fame, their beauty, their wealth, they can't approach the Lord sincerely. They can't offer sincere prayer, even. So we see this living entity here in the womb is offering a sincere prayer. So clearly, in such a circumstance of suffering, it's kind of a conducive environment to remember God. Usually when people are enjoying, it's very difficult to remember Krishna. But when they're suffering, you tend to call out to the Lord. That's actually one of the downsides of the heavenly planets, is that everything just seems so perfect, you don't think that there's the need to make any further advancement onwards. So we become akinchana. We realize that the only thing which we really have in this world, or that we should aim to possess, is the devotional service of the Lord. And we withdraw our investments from the material energy and place them into devotional service as simply a selfless servant. And Shamchandra Prabhu also, I'll just piggyback off your class. He also pointed out yesterday that suffering is ultimately adhyatmika klesha. It's ultimately the suffering of the mind. And the mind suffers because of our attachments to the material world. So Krishna says something similar to Queen Kunti in the Bhagavad Gita, where he says, Bhogaishvarya prasaktanam tayapahrita chetasyam vyavasayatmaka buddhi samadho navadiyate. That when one is too engrossed in material sense gratification and opulence, that determination to perform devotional service, it doesn't arise. It doesn't come about. Because again, this comfortable feeling, you think, what do I have to surrender to God for? I'm perfectly fine the way I am. I'm perfect and awesome. So, unfortunately, being in such a situation makes it very difficult to approach the Lord. So this attachment to material sense gratification, opulence, it can generally be reduced and taken care of with proper knowledge of the Ishvara, or the person who is actually the owner of those things that we're attached to, the owner and the controller. It says in the Sri Upanishad, Ishavasyam idam sarvam yat kincha jagatyam jagat tena tyaktena bunjita magrida kasya swidhanam. That everything in this whole material world is owned and controlled by the Lord, by Krishna. And therefore the intelligent person, he only takes what he needs, understanding it's a part of his quota. It's bestowed upon him by the Lord. All the animals, they're all getting their quota. The squirrels, they have their nuts and their seeds. And every animal is essentially taken care of. So we don't really have to pray for our daily bread. We have our quota. So understanding this helps us purify our attachments, because when we see this whole world as kind of paraphernalia, paraphernalia of the Lord, we can actually engage it in His devotional service. Otherwise, without this knowledge of who this world belongs to, the tendency is to misuse the property. Just like if you're standing in line at a grocery store and the person in front of you drops a $100 bill from their wallet or from their pocket, 99 out of 100 people, they're going to pick it up and they're going to give it back to the person in front of them. You're in plain sight, you're in public, and also, it's the rational thing to do. Most people are, they have at least that standard of ethics. And primarily, they've seen where it comes from. They can't make any excuses in their head. If they take it, they know without a doubt it's stealing. It's coming from they saw the person drop it. So they'll return it to them, tap them on the shoulder. But if you see, similarly, a $100 bill flying in a parking lot, you're going to chase after it, and you're going to think, oh man, what can I do with that $100 bill? I'm going to get myself, I don't know, what you can get for $100 these days. So simply because we don't have knowledge of who it belongs to, we tend to misuse it. So attachment means using the Lord's energy, using the Lord's property in a wrong way for sense gratification. And therefore, we become attached, and we have to keep taking birth over and over again. So even if we have made some advancement in this regard, because this verse from the Ksira-cora-gopinatha is talking about someone who's made some advancement, they know the world is paraphernalia of the Lord. Even if we've made some advancement, even if we've performed some devotional service and we know all these things, there's still the very real chance that we take birth again, and we take birth in the hands of those who are extremely unqualified to take care of us. And as this verse was saying, they're unable to refuse whatever is given to him. He falls into undesirable circumstances. So especially in Kali Yuga, especially in the Western countries, we're practically raised in a very materialistic consciousness where we're not only not discouraged from sinful activities, but we're actually encouraged to perform so many sinful activities. So maybe we don't know our best interest, and certainly society doesn't know our best interest either. Especially in, again, the Western countries, what we know as the four regulative principles, things not to do. These activities are the pillars of dharma, in a way. Intoxication, meat eating, illicit sex, gambling. These are the cornerstones of Western civilization. So if you don't do these things, you're like a crazy person. So when we're born into this world, we're put into the hands of such people who think this is normal, this is the education we receive, this is the direction we're pushed towards, and we can't refuse it. Especially at a young age, you're being indoctrinated, you're being brainwashed. So many people, back in the day at least, they would accuse the Hare Krishna movement of brainwashing people. And Srila Prabhupada would reply in two ways. One way is that, yes, we are brainwashing people, we are washing their brain. So in society, that's actually, there's a lot of brainwashing going on there as well. Or Srila Prabhupada would often say as well, there's no brain to wash. So that's the situation that we're in. When I first got initiated, one person who was in the same initiation ceremony was a much older Indian Mataji. And you can just tell she's like super innocent and like sweet and sincere. And then she had to vow to follow the four regulative principles, no meat eating, no intoxication, no illicit sex. And, we're all thinking like, what does she need to say this for? And she's probably scratching her head like, we have to vow like for this stuff? This is just human life. This is just normal. So depending on the situation we're born into, whose hands we're placed into when we're born, that's going to be the strong influence we're going to get. Similarly, one devotee that I often read with online, he lives in Pune. He's a brahmachari in India. In the Pune temple, they have really strict standards. So strict that you can't join the temple as a brahmachari if you've ever engaged in illicit sex. And for a Western person, that may seem like, whoa, that's crazy, But based on the culture there, anyone who engages in like sex before marriage, it's pretty understood that like it's like a weird circumstance. You know, it's an individual who might do other crazy things. So they actually have that rule in that ashram. And if we had that rule in the West, we wouldn't make probably like a single brahmachari. So we're in very different circumstances. You know, whatever circumstance you're born into is completely different. So just as we have entered this glorious parampara of Gaudiya Vaishnavism coming from Srila Prabhupada and Bhaktisiddhanta and so forth, similarly, we're all born into a kind of mundane parampara. Whereas in our spiritual parampara, we're led on a path back to Godhead by the acharyas. But in our mundane parampara, we're led on a path to hell by people who don't know any better. They have a poor fund of knowledge. And oftentimes they think they're helping. Again, they think they're doing the right thing. Prabhupada would give this one story, and I'll probably tell it very poorly, but at least we can get the idea from it. Of a boy who was afflicted with something, maybe like polio or tuberculosis or something. I'm not so familiar, or typhoid, or not so familiar with diseases that existed like in the 1930s. But he therefore had to follow a very strict diet. No fried food, not so much solid stuff. Just kind of raw fruits and vegetables like that. But he was always complaining that everyone else was taking such nice prasadam, and so his brother, thinking, well, my brother's obviously in some anxiety, let me relieve his anxiety, he brought him some kachoris, and the little kid stuffed his face with kachoris, but actually inflamed his disease so much he almost died. So although the brother had good intentions, he almost killed his younger brother because of that kind of ignorance. So oftentimes people, they think they're helping. So in the same way, people might engage in some sort of philanthropic activities in this material world, thinking that they're helping. But if they're not guided by Vedic intelligence, then actually these activities are just causing more disturbance to society. Another thing from yesterday's class, which was briefly mentioned, was the homeless crisis in Los Angeles. And I've lived here my whole life, and you really see how bad it is. I used to, before living in the temple, I used to work next to Skid Row at like a concert venue, and just like one street over was Skid Row, and it's like one of the craziest places on earth. There's just garbage fires everywhere. People are lying on the street. You don't know if people are alive or not. Even if you poke them, they could just be like in the middle of an OD or something. So Los Angeles County actually has allocated, I think, at least like $30 million to providing things like needles, clean needles, crack pipes, lighters, rubber bands to tighten your arms so you can inject heroin, Narcan, so when you inevitably overdose, because most of the drugs on the street these days are laced with fentanyl, then you can resuscitate yourself with Narcan. So this is a kind of charity that people's taxpayer monies are going into. But Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita describes that this kind of charity is in the mode of ignorance. It's in the wrong place, it's the wrong time, it's to the wrong people, and you're giving the wrong thing. So Srila Prabhupada says in his purport here that just how a nurse may be providing some bitter medicine when the baby is crying, but actually the baby is crying for his mother's milk. In the same way, all the suffering souls in this material world, what to speak of those souls on Skid Row, they're actually crying for Krishna's love. Whether they understand it or not, that's really the only thing that's going to satisfy them. And that's actually what they're hankering for, but they're looking for it in all the wrong places. But because we're covered over by the three modes of material nature, those cries, they only attract more poison from the hand of Māyā. So it's a very unfortunate circumstance that we're in. And the same can be said about our education systems as well, which Srila Prabhupada would often call slaughterhouses, which is like a really heavy term, What happens in a slaughterhouse? It's not, picking wheat or, any kind of cultivation for food. It's a very grotesque thing, There's blood, there's screaming, there's crying. Yes, animals cry, they scream, separated from their young ones. So Srila Prabhupada described these places as slaughterhouses. primarily for the reason that their aim is simply at sense gratification. There's no wisdom, there's no higher knowledge. The goal is to simply retain a large quantity of information, so then you can take shelter of some demonic person and be their servant. You know, this is the goal of this kind of education, and certainly it can be dovetailed and employed in Krishna's service. But without higher education, then it has no use. So higher education means, you know, the reformation of character, actually becoming an upright citizen, developing some good morals, some ethics, some spiritual knowledge, some sense of sustainable happiness, you know, getting out of the mode of passion, not hankering and lamenting so much, encouraging the mood of selflessness, actually contributing to society in a way other than just trying to extract its resources for our own senses. So this is real education. You know, we have our dear Bhakta Omkar joining us for 3 months in the temple in Bhakta Nicholas. Bhakta Omkar, he just graduated from USC. And before he goes to work at the end of the summer, he wanted to get some training, you know, so he can properly complete his education. Because he got a very good education at USC, but without, you know, the spiritual education of becoming a competent, you know, member of society in the real sense, then there's not really much to it. So unfortunately, we're in a society of the blind leading the blind. One Sankirtan line that Brigapati Prabhu uses, I don't know if he still uses it, but he mentioned it in a class once, and I thought it was really cool. That, you know, sometimes you go and you distribute a book to someone and say, oh, I don't have time, I have so many books I'm already reading. And Brigapati Prabhu would ask, well, do those books give you a life of eternity, knowledge, and bliss? And they would say, well, no. He said, well, then throw them out. Throw them out, they're useless. You know, throw them in the garbage. These books can do that. So that's real knowledge. Real knowledge is learning how to achieve a life of eternity, knowledge, and bliss. Real knowledge means understanding how to stop the cycle of birth and death, how to stop birth, death, old age, and disease, which no one here is going to teach you. So actually, ironically, the way to stop the cycle of birth and death is to take another birth, but it's to take a spiritual birth. We have to approach the spiritual master, tadvidi paripatena, pariprashnena sevya, upadekshyanti tekinam, janena tattvadarshina. And in this way, he can bestow knowledge upon us when we render devotional service. And this way, the Shastra is our mother, the spiritual master is our father. And this is our real birth. And they'll also teach us how to channel our greatest superpower. How to stop the cycle of birth and death is to learn how to control our attention. Because where attention goes, your energy flows. That's where you're setting yourself up for the future. So this science is explained in the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna says, Yam yam vapi smaram bhavam tyajindante kalevaram tam tamivaiti kontaya sadatad bhava bhavita. That according to that state of mind that we have when we come to the point of death, that state will attain again without fail in our next life. So it's like all of our activities in this life are creating a kind of mold, a subtle impression, which is preparing another material body. Or as Krishna describes in the Bhagavad Gita, like the air is carrying a fragrance. So the body is like the air, and the fragrance is the soul. So the subtle body is carrying the soul from another gross body to provide some continuity in the execution of its material desires. Or in more modern terms, you know, if you lose your phone or you drop your phone off a bridge, I don't know, just an example. You may think, oh, that's a real shame. I paid so much money for this phone. But you're not going to worry so much about your photos or your contacts and, you know, your settings and things like that, because there's the cloud. You know, most of these things are stored in a non-localized database. So if you lose the hardware, it's okay. There's the cloud. So that's the same thing. Our subtle body is storing our material desires. It's storing our progress. And it gets transferred to another body. So if we're not performing the proper activities of a human being, then the material nature won't award us another material body at the end of this life. Sometimes we see and please don't take offense to this, sometimes we see people of previous generations having the brand new iPhone 17 or whatever we're on now, and pretty much, they use it for calling, texting, maybe looking up something on the internet, taking a picture. But an iPhone can do so much more than that. An iPhone can, play video games, you can do FaceTime, you can run a business, you can do so many things with an iPhone. So in that sense, maybe, someone they should just get like a flip phone if you just want to call and text and take a photo. So that's the same thing. If we just want to sleep all day, we could take the body of a polar bear or something. I think they sleep like half of the year in hibernation. If you just want to have sex all day, you could be a dog, or even like pigeons. I heard pigeons can have sex like hundreds of times a day or something like that. If you just want to eat all day, be a pig. They're pretty good eaters. They have practically zero discrimination. They'll eat anything. So like that. So we have to be cultivating Krishna consciousness. It's a practice. It's kind of redundant at this point because I've given so many analogies, but still, there's one analogy that Brigapati Prabhu gives, which I use in so many of my classes that I give to college students, and they really like it. I heard you give it in a Bhagavad Gita class once that you can buy the top of the line MacBook Pro, get 1 terabyte worth of storage, really the best computer, and on one of those, again, you could run a country practically on that thing. You can do so many things. So getting the human form of life and not using it for self-realization is like having this brand new MacBook Pro and using it to try to crack walnuts. And even the walnuts you're not cracking. So even that you're not achieving. So we're trying to use this body for material sense gratification, but even that we're not succeeding in. So it's ultimately a shame. It's ultimately a loss. But if we're taught to focus our consciousness on Krishna, manmana bhava madbhakto madjitibam namaskuru mam vaisyas yutvaivam atmana matparayanaha, certainly will come to him. We can always think of Krishna, offer obeisances to him, perform these regulated activities of devotional service, will come to him. But it takes training. It's not so easy to remember Krishna. Being the association of devotees helps, having a spiritual master helps, reading Prabhupada's books help. Because it's not that, okay, yam yam vapi smaran bhavam, whatever I remember at the time of death, that's what I'll get. So I can live a whole life of nonsense, and then at my last breath, Hare Krishna. Unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. Because actually, Krishna's name, even the thought of Krishna, is non-different from Krishna. Because Krishna is paraphernalia, his activities, his pastimes, his names. These are all on the absolute platform. So if we think that we can conjure Krishna within our mind at our own whim, we have not understood the supreme independence of the Lord, that he is not obligated to even enter our mind if he doesn't want to. So if we have not cultivated the tendency to remember Krishna through a lifetime, there's no chance that we'll remember Krishna at the time of our death. He is not obligated to appear before us. So even if we do spend a lifetime remembering Krishna, and for some reason we're incapacitated at the time of death, and it's very difficult to remember Krishna, Krishna will actually remember us. So there's always that, because Krishna never forgets his devotee. So like this living entity here in the womb, clearly he had engaged in some sort of devotional service, or maybe he was very advanced on the path of jnana. But still he had to take a birth again. So we shouldn't also fall into that circumstance. It's clearly from these verses we've been reading, it's not an easy thing to take birth. We may think like, okay, maybe I won't finish Krishna consciousness, and I'll just have to come back. Even just the pangs of birth are just, we want to completely avoid it. What to speak of, again, having to go through, school and being brought up in a civilization like this. So if we have come to this path of devotional service, hopefully we can take it seriously. Obviously I'm preaching to the choir, everyone who's taking Krishna consciousness very seriously, much more than myself. But so in conclusion, our karmic activities and the suffering in this world, it's not enough to actually bring us to the path of devotional service, but it can direct us towards the proper attitude, the proper disposition, to feel that exhaustion, that after so many births in this material world, we finally realize that just this ain't it, and that there's something higher. And still, when we get born in this material world, we may be born in a circumstance where our gurus, or our first gurus, who are our parents, they're really bad gurus, and they teach us all the wrong things, and we get attached to those things. So we need to find a spiritual master and get proper education in order to return back home, back to Krishna. So those are just some things that this verse inspired me to think about. Thank you very much for your very kind attention, and again for allowing me to come here on this very sacred Vyasa-san in front of a very sacred assembly of Vaishnavas and being able to say something. If there are any questions or comments or corrections, or just something that's stuck that you just want to repeat and we could talk about a little more, we can do that at this point. Hare Krishna. Thank you. Yes, so Prabhu.
Hi, Prabhu. Thank you. Very wonderful class.
Hare Krishna.
Very nice. I think in the purport you were reading it, and it said in there that at some point the baby's crying, and the nurse tries to feed the child something or give the child something, although it doesn't satisfy, it just creates more suffering. So I was thinking when you were giving the class how that's the material world. It doesn't stop there at that child in the helpless condition, but throughout our whole life we're being fed so many things that we don't really want, but we're forced to take them because that's what the situation is. And until you actually come in contact with a person who knows what you want or what you should get, there's always this suffering going on in life. So it made me just kind of think how all of us in some condition or other came to Krishna consciousness, and all of a sudden we're happy. And we're happy doing the most, like austere things. Getting up in the morning so early, taking bath, chanting Hare Krishna, serving Krishna. These things, are really something that most people can't even dream of doing or think of doing. But they don't realize that those things are liberation. So it just made me think like that. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's really my favorite part of the purport. And that's kind of the whole idea of the verse. But that's a really good observation that even, it's not just those habits and things we learn when we're in that kind of very dependent situation when we're children. It's not that we grow up and then we become, really wise and intelligent and now we're free. No, we're still strictly controlled by the laws of nature, our material desires, and still we're being coaxed into activities which are not actually for our benefit. And the activities which are for our benefit, we don't even try because they don't even seem like waking up early and chanting and becoming a vegetarian and all these things. It seems like that, if there's any happiness, it's not there. And they seem like austerities at first, but then as soon as you start practicing them, you realize, oh, okay, now this is a huge relief actually. Yesterday we were having some class with the devotees in the ashram, and they asked me like how, coming to practice the 4 regulative principles, and I was like, was it difficult? And maybe at first it seems daunting, but once you start practicing it, then it definitely there's still like difficulties, but generally it's actually just a relief. But you just have to get into it. You have to start. But when people hear about it, they think it's like the most unattractive thing. People want to change Krishna consciousness in so many ways to accommodate, new people to, get more followers in the movement. But we just have to acknowledge the plain truth that, the 4 regulative principles are very unattractive things, and we're not going to change those. So the people who do come to our movement are very special individuals who are willing to perform austerity for a higher purpose. Shamchandra Prabhu. Or Sajjatmai Prabhu.
Thank you for the nice class, Prabhu. I'm going to try to see if I can explain myself in a question.
Okay.
We were focusing, especially yesterday's class, about the homeless and the unfortunate situation of the living entities suffering so much. And in our teachings, we all know, in general, we know that every action has a reaction, so you choose. The living entity choose, and that's why it's suffering. But now, from the social, political point of view, if you try to find a solution, will that be said that the government is failing in this, in not be able to find a solution for those people? And in a similar way, almost similar, let's say, because you mentioned, Srila Prabhupada mentioned that the teachings of the learning education outside is like a slaughterhouse, very strong. Devotees know that, many devotees, parents, but still they send their children to that for whatever reason. So are we also failing? So meaning now combining that, the government with all these unfortunate people there, not finding solution, the devotees, they also have knowledge, but they still send their kids to schools and to the slaughterhouse. What would you think it actually is what could be the solution?
Well, yeah, we can start with, I guess, the social political situation within the material sphere. I don't know so much about these things, but yeah, definitely they're failing because they're not addressing a root issue. Oftentimes we see, like also in the class yesterday, you may provide housing for someone, but then they run away, because actually the lifestyle that they've become accustomed to, you can't do in one of these, government provided housing. Many people, they're just in a situation mentally, they want to be able to sit on the street and, do drugs and sit out in their underwear in a tent because it's just, they don't have to go to work, they don't have to do all these things. So it's kind of the situation they're in. So it's more like a root cause. Just giving them clean needles so they don't overdose isn't solving it. Someone's problem is they're craving alcohol. Solving the problem doesn't mean giving them alcohol. Solving the problem means some rehabilitation. And then in terms of the movement, it's a very complex topic, certainly. I mean, Prabhupada wanted us to establish proper schools of education so we could teach our devotees, how to be competent members of the society, and to make spiritual knowledge the main thing. And yeah, most devotees will send their children to a university. And there's the unfortunate reality that, you may raise your child so nice in Krishna consciousness, and then you send them to university, and, I go to college campuses, and sometimes I see flyers that just like totally blow my mind. Like at SMC, there's one flyer that says, get your degree in sex. Or I was at one school in Santa Barbara, and there was a whole club about like, maybe some things I shouldn't even mention, but they were just like so explicit. So you go onto these campuses, and it's just totally normal to go and smoke dope and have illicit sex and do all sorts of things. So association is a very powerful thing. Now there can be supplements and complements to that to kind of counteract that, while they're getting some sense of that is valuable. They can get like a career further in life. But and most of these devotee kids who do go in that situation, and maybe they have difficulties and they do some things they're not supposed to, many of them bounce back, but yeah, some of them don't. So at least the small part I'm trying to contribute to that is like our ashram. We're trying to allow more like students to come and stay with us, especially like devotee kids. Parents, they want the best for their children, but also the kids are coming to a stage where they don't want to be like under constant surveillance from their parents, be a perfect devotee and like this. They want to kind of experience the world and develop in a natural way and learn that the world is a difficult place naturally. So at least in the ashram, we're establishing a program where students, they can come study at UCLA or USC, but simultaneously they attend a morning program. They take part in some club at their school. They come on Harinam on the weekends. So, they're not under that surveillance of their parents, and they're around a bunch of other young men, so they feel like they're growing naturally, but they have a good support system of a great spiritual community like that. So there are definitely things we could probably institute to help supplement that time in young people's lives, especially young devotees. And this is just one thing that we're doing here. But yeah, the complete answer to that problem, I don't have. Definitely there's some benefit to going to a traditional school, but there's also a lot of problems which arise, which Srila Prabhupada spoke profusely about. There's innumerable quotes where Srila Prabhupada is condemning modern education. Hare Krishna. Okay, thank you so much. Kantra Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.